Hello and welcome to my latest Patreon video. This video is the first part of the painting of the Smash Lord, the Necron Smash Lord that we made in one of the last videos. I'm really excited to paint this. It looks so cool. I've got a big kind of image in my head of how I want him to look. So we'll see. You've seen the colours on the palette, we're just shown up on screen. So this is Vallejo Game Color Night Blue, which is really like matte dark blue. You can see I've just kind of chipped away a little bit of the chest there, which wasn't quite flat. So flatten that out so that you can't really see the join, and that was the first coat of paint that went on there. So this is Vallejo Game Color Night Blue. Like I say, this is a really good opaque matte finish paint, and it's what I use as a base tone for a lot of my Necrons. Well, for all of my Necrons at the moment. The latest colour scheme. This is the 4th iteration of the colour schemes for my Necrons. I've been using them for a while. This is the latest colour scheme. So Night Blue. This is basically just very carefully placed all around the model. I try to keep it out of the shadows, so I kind of have the black line as much as I can within the model. And then this is the second colour. So the second colour is model colour medium blue, and this is like sketching out where the highlights are going to go. Now I make a little bit of a mistake here, because that highlight that I've just placed on there, we're going to actually have to scrub off later in the painting, because the hammer is going to have a very large and obvious, well, maybe not obvious, but it's going to be kind of subtle, but it's going to be quite a large green glow emanating from it. And the way you have to get OSL to work is that everywhere that it's going to reflect onto needs to be particularly dark. So all of this left side of the model, as you look at it, is going to have to be very dark. Anyway, so these highlights that I'm placing down here, we're going to have to glaze down a little bit, but just placing them in particularly on the head as well. The head, the Necron heads are really good fun to paint actually. You can, as long as you can get the details nice and fine on it, you can really get some emotion in there and make them look angry and cross, and get some very cool kind of atmospheric highlights. Again, this highlight, so it's basically the way I sketch out. You can see where the highlights are on this because of the way the light is catching the model, and you can see those two strips there where the light was catching the model, and that one there. So it's using the lamp from above to really sketch out where the light is going to hit on these panels. This is, like I say, this is the kind of the initial sketch out of what and where the highlights are going to be placed. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I use six blues to highlight my Necrons. This is the, if you like, this is the third in line. So I skip the middle one. So we do Night Blue as the darkest, and then it's Imperial Blue, and then Medium Blue, which is this one. So the way the reason why I do this is Imperial Blue is it's not as opaque a colour as this medium blue. So if you try and sketch out the highlights with the Imperial Blue, it's a little bit difficult to see where you've been and what you've done. So instead I sketch them with this medium blue, and then I can glaze back the transitions a little bit with Imperial Blue, as you'll see in a second. But it's a very kind of efficient way, if you like, of doing it like this, because you can see exactly where you are. You can be a little bit rough. You can see I'm not using a pristine brush, and we're placing the highlights down on the model pretty quickly, paying attention not to kind of catch anything that we don't want to, but we do have that night blue, the darkest blue, to almost act as a eraser if we do, and just paint it out, paint any mistakes out. Again, this is another area which the highlight is probably going to have to be scrubbed off, because the glow from that green hammer, it's going to be a massive green like power hammer. It's there's the Necrons have a relic or they had a relic. It's currently not in the game at the moment, but they had a relic in 5th edition, I think it was, in the 5th edition codex, called the Tremor Stave. And when I was making this, I was thinking about that relic, and I was like, well, this can be represented by the Tremor Stave in the game. It would be really cool and have like a massive lightning effect on it. We're going to do the next video on this is going to be painting the whole hammer and how we're going to make that glow work across that left hand side of the model. So you can see there, so all the way, if you imagine a big circle of light coming from the hammer, obviously that's going to hit all of the left hand side of the model. So those highlights that we've just placed on there on the thigh guard and the chest, we're going to have to kind of glaze out anyway. So this is the colour that we're actually going to make the glow, and we're doing a kind of a small version of the glow here around the centre orb on his forehead. So it's really important when you're doing OSL to understand where the brightness needs to be. So this is the darkest of the greens that I use. This is olive green, as we showed up at the beginning. And olive green is a very, very translucent paint. It's not opaque at all. It doesn't cover very well at all. Again, all of these paints on the wet palette are watered down about 1:1, so 1 part water to 1 part paint. So they're nice and thin, so we're not building up layers of paint, like 3-dimensional layers of paint anyway on the model. So it works particularly well with olive green because we can build up these glows very, very easily with it. Now, the importance here is that we still maintain the contrast here. So the orb still has that black line around it from the recess. We don't really want to fill that. That's going to help with the OSL a little bit, the OSL glow. So we get the glow from having the light source brighter than the actual glow, and the glow that emanates and reflects onto the armor panels here kind of tricks the eye into thinking that's the color of the light source. So the light source is always going to be bright. It's always going to be almost less saturated than the actual glow, which is why the light sources here have all got the base tone of this olive green, and then that's going to be the base glow color. And then we highlight them up from here, yeah, you'll see a little bit more of the glow happening in the next video when we do the hammer. But we're placing all the light sources down here now with the olive green, and we're also sketching out a little bit of the glow and where the glow is going to be hitting. So you can see it kind of catching the edge of the wrist there, and just that little corner of the forearm as well. And because I'm kind of imagining in my head that these power sources have got electricity coursing through them, they're going to be almost like crackling. So in some areas the highlights aren't going to be exactly soft. They're going to have some crackle and some lightning and some texture to them as well as the light changes, and you can see me kind of stippling in some of the colour here as well, to kind of get some texture on there. And we're going to really play around with the texture that you can get when we do the hammer. It's always an interesting thing on what colour you paint that little buckle on his belt, whether just above his loincloth, whether that is an energy source or whether it's decorative. Do you paint it gold? Do you paint it silver? Do you paint it the light source? Do you just paint it a different colour? It's always a thing. I've decided to paint it as a light source on this one. So the kind of the idea of this character, and you can see was painting more of the light sources down here as well. I'll explain what that is in a second. But the kind of the idea of this character is that he's got a thunder hammer, so he's going to be thunder and lightning. So in one hand he's got the thunder hammer esque. It's going to be the tremor stave, but in my head it's representing thunder, and then the extra arm coming off his shoulder is representing the lightning, which is why these are going to be very, very bright. So we're kind of sketching in the highlight, the OSL highlights here. So that's going to be the light source. They're going to be very, very bright, Again, we're kind of throwing some texture on there to try to get them showing a little bit of a glow, and then that glow is going to be casting a glow all the way down onto the back side of the shield. So you saw us paint, and you can see a little bit of it there on the top of the shield, how that light is kind of cascading down and catching the top of the shield there. And putting a second layer of this green just to bring up the opacity level of it. It probably it's a green that tends to need about 2 or 3 coats, particularly with the kind of level that I water it down at. If you don't water this down, you tend to get some brush marks in this. It's very it's a paint that is, if you don't water it down, you can get some really kind of strong brush marks where you lift the brush off. It can leave quite a mark, and particularly when you kind of put the brush down in the first place as well, it can leave quite a mark. So you need to water this paint down a little bit. I do wonder whether it's one of those paints where I wonder whether I was shaking it up enough and the medium has actually separated a bit from the pigments, but it is just the paint. Kind of yellow paints are kind of known for being not particularly opaque paints. You get some of them where they add a little bit of white in to try to make them opaque, and then they go a bit chalky. But this one is just a very translucent paint by nature. So just building up these layers on the lightning rods, if you like. These are going to be a lot of fun to paint. I'm looking forward to painting these as well. So we might get around to these in the next video as well. When we do the lightning and the texture on the hammer, we might do the same on these lightning rods. I don't really know what to call these, but I can imagine they're like coursing with energy, and they've got maybe they shoot out at the enemy, and the tips on the end electrocute them or something. I don't know, but in my mind, it was 2 sides of thunder and lightning on this model. And you can see on the end of the hammer as well, that pommel on the end of the hammer, that's going to be glowing as well. That's going to be a light source, so we're going to have a big light source down the back of the cloak on this one. The cloak, I think the cloak is going to be silver. I don't want him to be too. He's almost going to be like the first captain, almost the first lord in the Pharaon, in the dynasty. So Surtek Ra, which is the Pharaon of my dynasty, he's going to have like a little bit of a hierarchy for his lords. His top lord is going to be Apophis, which is the one that I did for Golden Demon with the Veil of Darkness, just because that's my favourite model. So he's going to be a little bit more grandeur. He's going to have a little bit more gold and intricacies on his armour. This guy's almost like a newly promoted lord. I know you don't really get lord promotions and things in Necrons, but I think of him as someone who was chosen, a leash guard, just almost a leash guard that was chosen at random, or maybe somebody who just killed somebody in battle and it was like, yeah, you'll do. And then the cryptex were tasked to build him some more armour. So here again, we're kind of sketching in this glow and how far this glow is going to go down the shield, and then we're kind of glazing and darkening that in as well. That top edge, that's going to have to get a glow as well. So we're trying to pull that glow, pull the green down nice and smoothly on this. Trying to get a smooth transition between the green and the blue is quite difficult with this. So we're kind of wet blending these two together at the moment. See the blend happening between the green and the blue a little bit more there. We can play around with that more as the painting goes on. We're just kind of sketching in where we want the lights to be. We also need to hit the shoulder pads. The reason why I haven't touched the shoulder pads in this video is because I haven't decided whether they're going to be silver or blue yet. So if they're going to be silver, they need a coat of silver on before I start doing the OSL. and if they're going to be blue, then I can kind of throw the OSL on now. But I'll hopefully have decided that before the next video anyway, and you'll be able to see which colour they're going to which colour they are going to go. I would imagine they're going to go blue, gold. Oh god, I can't even get the words out. I imagine they're going to go silver. It's going to be a very kind of silver model, this, I think. So this is one of the light sources. This is a similar way of. This is the first kind of a glimpse of how we're going to do the hammer as well. So we get the olive green on, and we almost scrub it on to kind of create some texture, moving the paint around, creating little circles and swirls, and then we can build on that texture, and you can see it's starting to look a little bit like it's got something going on in there. Well, you can't now because I covered it with my little thumb. It's got paint on my thumb. But yeah, so that kind of scrubbing motion is going to be one of the ways that we're going to get some texture into the hammer, and then that texture we can then accentuate. So we use the texture to then create the lightning strikes and things inside it, so we can make the lightning strikes follow that random texture, because one of the things that the human brain does is tries to create patterns. It's never truly random when you're painting. If you were trying to paint a lightning strikes on there, you would almost have a little bit of normalcy to it, if you like. Have a little bit too much perfection, sort of thing. It would be too many patterns. There we go, that's the word. But if by scrubbing the paint on like that, we're kind of using the brush tips and the brushes bristles to create some texture in there that we can then follow later in the painting process. Again, another little bit of a light source. That's going to be anything kind of energy based on here. I'm going to try and do green. I almost don't want to paint this guy too blue. I want to have him very, very dark, and then just like green showing through everywhere, just a green glow emanating from absolutely every single light source. So what we might do is paint up all these highlights on the blue, and then just glaze them all back with some black, Abaddon black, or maybe some Corvus black, to try to darken it down so that we can start playing around with the glow a little bit more. So this is the Imperial blue that I told you about before. So you can see that's between the two blues, the night blue on the left and the medium blue on the right, and then you've got the Imperial blue above them. Now I've created two kind of pools there. One is the one on the left has got a little bit less water in it, and the one on the right has quite a bit more water. So we can pick from either of those pools when we're now glazing these transitions back a little bit. It's quite a nice blue to work with. It's a really nice blue to work with, to be fair. And you can glaze the transitions between the medium and the night blue very, very well with it. Sometimes too well. You can kind of get carried away a little bit. That drip on the ferrule of my brush is gonna bug me for the rest of this video until I get rid of it. It's gonna drip on something and ruin the paint job. So yeah, you can get a little bit carried away with this and glaze it too much, and then you're kind of just going from night blue to Imperial blue, and you've lost that medium blue highlight. But in this sense, it's probably a good idea, because we're going to have to glaze all this back anyway, particularly on this side, like I said. And that angle there, that angle from the camera that you saw there, looking across over the top of the hammer, is actually perfect to show where the light is going to land, because the light source is going to be the hammer. So we're going to be looking down that line to try to see where and what parts are going to be hit by the light source of the hammer, because some parts will be shadowed by others, and so making sure and making accurate light placement is going to be quite important for selling the glow. So I cut quite a way into this one, and try and take quite a bit of that highlight down. Again, it's something that you can do with these three blues. They're quite cool. and I was playing around with one of the models, a few of the immortals that I'm painting for the army at the moment, and I've started to, after I've glazed Abaddon Black into the shadows, I then start doing a little bit of Incubi Darkness and Dark Sea Blue into the shadows as well, just to introduce a little bit of green, to almost complement the green glow that is going to go into the highlights as well. So we've got a cool little transitions going on here between the bright blue, the bright green, and then some dark greeny blue in the shadows. So it's kind of pulling the whole model together, but you'll see that again in a later video. I'm looking forward to getting this guy done. I'm actually going to record the hammer video today, so after I've done this voiceover for you, I will post this video, and then we'll get the hammer done. Anyway, you don't need to do that. So the highlight on the head, there's one strong highlight across the top of the head, across the top of the forehead, which you just saw me glaze across, and then that's going to be accentuated by some spot highlights on the corners as well. That was an interesting highlight for me to see, actually, that one that I just did on the arm. So you saw me place it in earlier in the video, and you saw me place it on two sides of the arm. When it was sitting there underneath the highlights, underneath my light, I saw two highlights, one on either side of the arm, so I painted them both in, and I'd be interested to know, although strangely that's probably going to have to be glazed back because it's going to be a bit of a green glow on that one, but it was interesting to see those two highlights appear on both sides of the arm. And this is the night blue is a very good colour to be able to see the highlights as well. So you'll see when I bring it back to being square, just kind of pay attention to where the light looks like it's hitting on the model. And you can see underneath the ribs, for instance, they've got a lovely little highlight that shows up there. We'll have to tick those in with a bit of magic blue later, which is the nice edge highlight blue, which starts selling the colour of the blue a bit more. So a little bit of night blue on here. So this orb should probably be silver. However, I really wanted to get a little bit more blue on this model, knowing that there was going to be quite a bit of green on there. So I've just decided to paint this orb blue as well. So it also allows us to paint some little specular highlights on there. And that's I'm going to highlight that all the way up. You can see the specular highlights on that side. I'm going to highlight that all the way up and then glaze some green back over it. The main glow from those lightning rods, I don't really know what to call those, but the main glow from those is going to be down onto the shield. So we'll just kind of catch a little bit going backwards. I can imagine that the glow from that is going to be more prominently going forwards and down onto the shield than it is going to be going backwards onto those little orbs. So you can see we're just doing a little bit of a tick there and then kind of blending it in, just keeping the brush wet, blending that in with the blue. You can see that transition going across there, and the same with that little edge highlight. So I was saying earlier that the shoulder pads are probably going to be silver, and if they are going to be silver, I need to put the silver on first before I do the OSL. You'll have seen then I was putting tiny little highlights on the little mechanical part that was holding the lightning rods, or the lightning lines. I just don't know what to call them. So because they are so small, we can then tick them with some metallic on the opposite side to sell the fact that they're metallic. So that's not the reason why I've highlighted those is different to the shoulder pad. The shoulder pad would need to be silver, and then we'll glaze that colour all the way across it. Lovely little tick on the nose there, because we're green glowing orb in his forehead is going to catch the edge of the nose as well. So little green glowing nose. I love painting the ankh. The ankh is a difficult part of the model for some people. If you get a very small amount of paint on the tip of your brush, you can almost dab it on. If you dab it on, you've got less of a chance of the paint kind of catching an edge and running into a recess. So if you draw across the ankh in a kind of a brush stroke, occasionally the brush can or the paint can catch on one of the edges of the ankh and then run down into a recess and just make it look a little bit messy. So if you are painting a Necron ankh like that, just kind of dab the paint on, and then that will help make it nice and crisp. The ankhs, because they're so small, they're very susceptible to, if you slip and do get a little bit of paint in the recess, it can kind of throw the look of the ankh and how neat it looks. So here's the magic blue. This is the magic highlight, if you like. It's suitably named blue. So once the Necron is nice and dark, this blue kind of sells the fact that it is actually a blue model. Well, I try to very much keep this to an edge highlight wherever I can. There are some places where I will allow it to be a little bit thicker. Same idea. I'm looking to where the edges are going to be hit with the light that's coming from my light source above, and then just kind of ticking those light sources. We have two more blues after this. We have deep sky blue and also sky blue. Sky blue is literally just a dot highlight. Deep sky blue is a thinner highlight. So this is, if you follow the kind of heavy metal naming of highlight layers and painting techniques, this is almost like a chunky highlight, if you like. It's a very thin chunky highlight, but it's a chunky highlight, if you like. The deep sky blue is then the really fine one that sits on top of it to start bringing out a little bit more light direction. So you can see there, just before I painted that, you can see that that's where the light is hitting, so it's got a lovely little highlight on that edge. I tried to freehand an edge on this. It's incredibly difficult to try to get this edge, and it always bugs me that this isn't highlighted when I don't highlight it. That little edge around the armpit. So I always do try to highlight it, and inevitably I always mess up because it's a very smooth curve that you need to freehand on there, which can get a little bit awkward at times. There we go. So that side of the body can kind of stay this dark. This side we are going to, like I said, I've been saying it all video now, this side we are going to glaze back, but we can come to that later. It's probably not particularly a bad thing that I've highlighted this up, because we can use these tonal transitions once it is glazed back with some black to darken it down, to still keep those tonal transitions in there. So it's probably not a bad idea. You don't want all of that side to be completely black or completely dark. So it probably does work. It's not too bad that it's being done. So if you are following along, don't be too disheartened if you have kind of done that side and you're like, oh, now we're going to paint it black. Just hitting some edges. The edge of the chest is always, I always try and make that as kind of as bright as I can. So those ones will get kind of all the nice little fine highlights as well. That chest is right underneath the head. The head is always going to be the focal point of the model. This model is going to be quite interesting to see if we can balance the focal points, because the focal point is arguably going to be the hammer, but we can see if we can. The hammer's got quite a nice little line that leads from the hammer to the head, so we should be able to kind of tell the story and get the eyes moving in the correct way across the model. From left to right, if we can, left to right from the hammer all the way down to the head. But we're going to have to put quite a lot of effort into the head as well, so that it can kind of hold its own against the hammer. Again, another little highlight which we're probably going to glaze over, because most of that is going to be green. But again, probably good to have some tonal transitions in there. So edge highlight, there's a lot of people who say you have to edge highlight with the side of the brush. Also practice highlighting edges with the tip of the brush like that, for those occasions like that part there where you just can't get the angle of the brush into a 45 degrees. So that one there was no chance of me. I can't get because the shield's in the way. So to be able to get the brush at 45 degrees for that angle, I can't do it. The only angle to get into that access to paint it like that would have been highlighting the underside. And obviously you don't want to highlight the underside of the panel, so just highlighting the tip, highlighting with the tip. So now I'm glazing that transition back a little bit. I went a little bit thick on that highlight, so I'm just getting some of the imperial blue and just kind of glazing all that transition back a little bit, just to soften it down and make that mark a little bit less heavy. And same here as well. I'm just kind of glazing that transition back a little bit with some imperial blue. Now that top rib that I'm painting there, it always needs a little bit of light on it, but not too much, because it's going to have a shadow cast on it from the shoulder armor that's coming around and over its neck. So it always needs a little bit of highlight on it, but never the same as the ribs that are underneath it. But it needs to be lighter than night blue, for instance. So that was like a quick imperial blue touch there. So the first part of the next video, I am going to show glazing all of these back and how I do it, and hopefully you'll be able to see the difference between the few lines there. Oh, sorry about that, I had to turn the microphone off, I had a sneezing fit. So another little touch on that ball, just to kind of make a nice specular highlight, and then we're doing an edge highlight again around here. These are going to be, again, these are a little bit chunky, so that we've got room to glaze them back a little bit. There's probably not going to be too much green glow down on here. Like I said before, I don't want the green coming back too far onto that arm, so I can kind of take that quite light and quite bright in the blue highlighting there. You can see it already looking quite cool on that far back edge. Excuse me, guys. Always difficult having a camera view of what you're painting sometimes. But yeah, I'm just glazing those transitions back down again. So just painting over the transition between the two colours, the medium blue and light blue. And there we go. So you can see the highlight on the orb kind of starting to pop now as well. And then just hitting that forehead highlight. That was a little bit of magic blue. And the same on the edge. So like I was saying, we need to make sure that this head is going to look immaculately clean. We're going to do some really fine details on it so that once you have followed your eye from the hammer up the arm, following the glow to the head has got plenty of interest to hold you as well. The head's got to be particularly good. I probably shouldn't have glued it in actually, because we're going to have to put quite a bit of detail on it. But there we go. I hope you enjoy part 1, and I will be back very soon with part 2. Thank you guys, see you next time.